The merger agreement sat on Nathan's desk, waiting for his signature. My brother leaned back in his leather chair, a smug smile playing across his face as he watched me clean out my office. "And I'm Alexandra," he said, examining his Rolex. "If you just listened to me from the start, none of this would have happened. Tech companies need strong leadership. Being nice doesn't cut it." I continued packing my belongings, careful not to let him see my hands shaking. After 5 years of building my software company from the ground up, watching it crumble because of his deliberate sabotage was almost unbearable. "Nothing to say," he chuckled. "That's new. Usually you're full of ideas about workplace culture and employee satisfaction. Fat lot of good. That did you when your top developers jumped ship to join me." He wasn't wrong about that. Nathan had systematically poached my best people, offering them ridiculous salaries and stock options that my smaller company couldn't match. But what really hurt was how he done it, using information he gathered during our weekly family dinners, when I trustingly shared my concerns about cash flow and expansion plans. "Just sign the papers." "Nathan," I said, keeping my voice steady, "you've won, isn't that enough?" He picked up the pen, still smirking. "You know what Dad always said? There's no room for sentiment in business. You should thank me, really. I'm saving you from yourself by absorbing your company before you run it completely into the ground." Dad, of course, he bring him up. Our father had built one of the largest tech consulting firms on the West Coast, but he died before choosing which of us would take over. Nathan being older, and Mail had assumed it would be him. "When Dad's will split the shares equally between us." Nathan had been livid there, he said, scrawling his signature across the bottom of the page. "Now you can go start a charity or whatever it is." Bleeding hearts like you do. If he hadn't been so focused on his victory, he might have noticed something odd about the document, might have questioned why my lawyer had insisted on using her own paperwork rather than his, might have wondered why I'd given in so easily to his hostile takeover. But Nathan had always underestimated me, just like he'd underestimated our father's foresight. I picked up the signed papers, tucking them carefully into my briefcase. "Goodbye, Nathan. I'm sure Dad would be proud of how you've handled things." His smile faltered slightly at that, but he recovered quickly. "Don't be bitter, Alex. It's just business. Just business." That's what he'd said when he started spreading rumors about my company's stability to our clients. What he repeated when he convinced our biggest investor to pull out, creating a cash crisis that forced me to lay off half my staff. I walked out of his office, past the rows of developers who used to work for me, through the lobby with its pretentious modern art in the elevator. I finally allowed myself a small smile. Nathan thought he destroyed me, but he hadn't read Dad's will as carefully as I had, hadn't noticed the clause about majority control requiring both siblings' active involvement in the industry, hadn't realized that by forcing me out, he triggered a provision that would redistribute voting shares by tomorrow morning. The board would receive notice that I now controlled 60% of our father's company, including the subsidiary that had just absorbed my smaller firm. My phone, buzz a text from Maria, "My lawyer papers, board meeting scheduled for 9 a.m., everything ready." "Yes," I replied. Nathan signed without reading, too busy. Gloating, I stepped out into the San Francisco sunshine, feeling lighter than I had in months. Nathan had taught me a valuable lesson about business, just not the one he thought he was teaching. The real lesson was about patience, about playing a long game, about letting your opponent think they've won while you position your pieces for checkmate. My next stop was a small tech startup across town, one that Nathan didn't know about. One filled with loyal former employees who left my company with my blessing, carrying with them the core of our most innovative project. "How it go?" Jake, my former lead developer, asked as I walked in. I handed him a USB drive. "The merge is complete. Start implementing the integration protocol. By this time tomorrow, Nathan's entire system will be running on our architecture." Jake Grant, he still thinks we're building a social media app. That's what all the paperwork shows. I confirmed he was too busy destroying my company to notice what we were really developing. The truth was, while Nathan had been focused on hostile takeovers and corporate raids, my team and I had been creating something revolutionary, a blockchain-based security system that would make our father's old consulting business look prehistoric. I sat down at my workstation, fingers flying across the keyboard as I began the final phase of our plan. On screen lines of code scroll, past the foundation of a new kind of company, one built on collaboration rather than competition. Nathan thought he'd written the last chapter of our story. He was wrong. This was just the beginning. The next morning, I arrived at the board meeting early, taking my seat at the far end of the conference table. One by one, the board members filed in, followed by Nathan, who barely glanced in my direction before we began. I said as Nathan opened his mouth to speak, "There are some ownership changes that need to be addressed." I nodded to Maria, who began distributing documents to each board member. Nathan's face darkened as he scanned the first page. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice rising. "These numbers can't be right. They're quite accurate," Maria replied calmly. "According to your father's will, if either sibling is forced out of active industry participation, their shares in the parent company are automatically distributed by orchestrating the hostile takeover of Miss Carter's company." He triggered that clause. The blood drained from Nathan's face as he flipped through the pages. "This is ridiculous. I didn't force her out. She signed the merger agreement voluntarily, an agreement I pointed out that specifically required me to step down from any executive role, your words, if I remember correctly. Where there's no place for your management style in my organization, the board members were muttering among themselves. Now reviewing the documents with increasing interest, Nathan's hands were shaking as he reached the final page. "You planned this?" he accused, pointing a finger at me. "You set me up." "No, Nathan. Dad planned this. He knew exactly what you do." If given a chance, the clause was his way of protecting the company from exactly this kind of predatory behavior. I stood up, walking to the head of the table. His spot, and now as majority shareholder, I'm calling for an immediate vote on new executive leadership. The next hour was chaos. Nath raged, threatened legal action, even tried to claim I was mentally unfit to lead an argument that fell flat when Maria produced records of my company's innovation patents and successful projects before his interference, but the numbers didn't lie. I now controlled 60% of the shares in the board, many of whom had quietly disapproved of Nathan's aggressive tactics over the years, voted overwhelmingly in my favor. "This isn't over," Nathan snarled as security escorted him from the boardroom. "You have no idea how to run a company this size?" I waited until he was gone before addressing the board. "I know many of you have concerns about this transition. I'd like to show you something that might ease your minds." I pulled up the presentation Jake and I had prepared on the screen. Our new security systems architecture appeared a revolutionary approach to data protection that would put us years ahead of our competitors. While my brother was focused on hostile takeovers, I explained my team and I were developing this. It's already being implemented across all our systems, including the recently acquired divisions. The board members leaned forward, their expression shifting from concern to interest as I detailed the potential applications and projected revenue streams. "This is impressive," the head of the audit committee admitted, "but can we be sure it works?" I smiled. Clicking to the next slide, "Check your phones." They did, finding new security certificates and authentication protocols already in place. The system had been integrating seamlessly since Nevin signed those merger documents, spreading through the company's network like a benevolent virus. "Everything you see here was developed by my failed company," I said quietly, "the same one my brother was so eager to destroy. The question isn't whether I can run this company, it's whether we can afford to continue with leadership that puts personal vendetta us above innovation." By the end of the day, Nathan's personal effects had been cleared from the CEO's office. I stood at the window, looking out over the San Francisco skyline, remembering all the times he dismissed my ideas, belittled my achievements, assumed his way was the only way. My phone buzzed. A text from our mother. Nathan told me what happened. "How could you do this to your own brother?" I didn't reply. She'd always favored Nathan, excused his behavior, blamed me for any conflict between us that wouldn't change, and I'd made my peace with it. Instead, I called Jake. "How's the integration going?" "Perfectly." He reported. "Nathan's entire infrastructure is now running on our platform. He probably won't even notice until he tries to access the admin controls and the backup copies of our code already distributed to secure locations. Even if he somehow gets back in, he can't undo what we've done." I sat down at what had been Nathan's desk, running my fingers over the smooth mahogany surface. "Send out the all-staff email. I want everyone to understand what's changing and what isn't." Because unlike Nathan, I didn't believe in ruling through fear. The company would transform, but not through hostile takeovers and forced mergers. We would grow through innovation, collaboration, and respect for every employee's contribution. That evening, as I prepared to leave the office, I found a photo I hadn't seen in years. It showed Nathan and me as children standing in this very office with our father. We were both smiling, both full of dreams about following in his footsteps. I wondered what that little girl would think of me now. Would she understand that sometimes protecting what matters means making hard choices? That sometimes the only way to stop a bully is to beat them at their own game? I placed the photo in my desk drawer. The past was done. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove that success doesn't have to come at the expense of ethics. Nathan had taught me that lesson. just not in the way he'd intended. The following weeks brought changes no one expected. Nathan, rather than admitting defeat, launched a calculated counterattack. He reached out to every major client, every investor trying to undermine my leadership, but he found a different company than the one he'd left behind. Our new security system had already impressed the biggest players in Silicon Valley. 3 major tech firms reached out about licensing agreements within the first month. The stock price soared as news of our innovation spread. But Nathan had one last card to play. Miss Carter, my assistant said one morning, "Your mother's here. She's demanding to see you." I looked up from my computer to see Mom striding into my office. Neighing close behind her, she carried a folder I recognized, Dad's old medical records. "This has gone far enough," she announced, slapping the folder on my desk. "Your father wasn't in his right mind when you wrote that. Will we have proof?" I opened the folder calmly. Inside were Dad's neurologist reports from his final months. Nathan had highlighted certain phrases: early cognitive decline, possible impairment in judgment. "You really want to do this?" I asked, looking between them. "Drag Dad's memory through the mud to satisfy your ego?" "It's not about ego," Nap and snapped. "It's about what's right. Dad built this company from nothing. He wouldn't have wanted some bleeding heart idealist turning it into a charity case." I pulled out my laptop, typing briefly before turning it to face them on screen. Was a video Dad in his study recorded just weeks before his death. "If you're watching this," he began, his voice clear and strong, "then my children have finally shown their true colors. Nathan, your sister isn't the weak link you think she is. Alexandra, your brother isn't the leader he pretends to be. I split the company because neither of you is ready to run it alone." Mom sank into a chair, her face pale. Nathan remained standing, his fists clenched. "The redistribution clause wasn't about punishment," Dad continued. "It was about protection for the company, for our employees, and for both of you. Whoever's watching this now has proven they understand what real leadership means." The video ended. The silence in the office was deafening. "He knew," I said softly. "He knew you tried to take everything, Nathan, and he knew I'd have to learn to fight back. This changes nothing." Nathan insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. "The board has already seen this." I interrupted, along with documentation of every underhanded tactic you used to sabotage my company. "Would you like them to see these medical records too? To know you were willing to destroy Dad's reputation just to regain control?" Mom stood up. "Suddenly this isn't what I wanted," she said, her voice shaking. I thought if you understood about Dad's condition, you thought wrong." I replied firmly. "It's over. Both of you need to accept that." Nathan stormed out, but Mom lingered. "He's still your brother," she said pleadingly. "Yes, he is. And when he's ready to accept that we're equals, maybe we can rebuild something, but not until then." After they left, I sat at my desk for a long time, thinking about family and legacy and the price of success. The company was thriving. Our security system was revolutionizing the industry. Our workplace culture was attracting top talent, and our stock price had doubled, but the cost had been high. Family dinners were a thing of the past. Mom barely spoke to me. Nathan, while last I heard he'd moved to Austin to start over 6 months later, I received an unexpected email from Mathen. "Alex, Dad was right about everything. I'm not asking for forgiveness or a role in the company. Just wanted you to know that you proved me wrong. You're a better leader than I ever was." Nathan, I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I forwarded him our latest project proposal, a startup incubator program focusing on collaborative tech innovation, the kind of project he'd always dismissed as wasteful. His response came within hours. "Need any advisors?" It wasn't an apology, but it was a start. Sometimes I realized victory isn't about destroying your opponent. Sometimes it's about showing them a better way to play the game today. The company is stronger than ever. Nathan consults occasionally, bringing valuable insights without trying to control everything. Mom's starting to understand that business success and compassion aren't mutually exclusive. And that video from Dad, I keep it on my desk, a reminder that true leadership isn't about power or control. It's about building something that lasts, something that makes everyone stronger. In the end, Nathan taught me how to fight, but Dad taught me why to fight. The company isn't just about profit margins and market share. It's about creating a legacy of innovation, collaboration, and respect. That's something worth protecting, no matter the cost.